Welcome to Ingenious Films, sharing the genius of engineering.
You've probably heard of 3D printing already, but you may not have thought of it as engineering. I met up with a mechanical engineer who is an expert in 3D printing to find out more.
The interesting thing about mechanical engineering is it's not just one job. You might be working on aeroplanes, you might be working on toys for disabled children, or in my case, 3D printing. You're all probably used to taking a two-dimensional photograph on your camera or on your phone and then printing that out. What we do with 3D printing is more or less exactly the same. We take a 3D photograph on the computer, we slice that into layers, and then using whatever material and process we've chosen, we then do one layer at a time and we keep building those, stacking them until we have the final part. We can use almost any material and any method of processing you can think of. So some of the most common methods are using a laser to melt some powdered material. We have some processes that squeeze a bit of plastic out through a nozzle, so a bit like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. And in some cases we actually have paper. So we stack layers of paper and then use that to form the final part. One of the reasons I love 3D printing is that it can be used for almost everything you can think of. These range from the kind of fun side of things. So for example, making a Christmas ornament, so something like this to go on your tree. And then there's the more serious side of things. So there's parts, for example, using these processes on the International Space Station and using them for medical applications. So a variety of things to help people get better after an accident. Perhaps they lost an arm or something like that. Being able to design something to fit that person exactly, and so to be able to reproduce that, but perhaps in a more realistic, more lifelike way than we could do before. Some of my favourite applications for 3D printing would be using it for racing cars. So a lot of the time if you watch, for example, a Formula 1 race on television, most of the cars that you see there have actually got 3D printed parts on them. For example, really complicated pipes for air to flow through, and these processes are really well designed to do those things. One project that I really enjoyed was looking at running shoes or trainers, and the idea of using 3D printing to personalise those. That might be just because you want it to look a bit different, so put some cool design on it or your favourite football team. And then there's the more serious side that if you perhaps when you run you're slightly off balance or slightly off centre, you can actually use that personalised 3D printed shoe to correct that. One thing you can use 3D printing for is actually for making textiles or clothing type things. So this is one example that we've worked on previously. Now, there's a number of reasons you might want to do it. One might just be for a fashion point of view. And then there's more serious applications, so for example, protective clothing for police or someone in the army, or maybe for someone playing sports, so perhaps a protective shin pad. The area of research I'm working on at the moment is looking at developing new materials for these processes. So we can use any material, more or less, but some of them work better than others. So some of them melt differently, some of them are more viscous, so stickier than others, and all of those things have an effect on the parts that you get out. The reason it's good to have lots of materials is obviously not everything's made from the same. So for example, for a running shoe, you might want some nice squishy material so it helps you when you're running. For certain other parts, like a chair that you're sitting on, you need it to be quite strong so it can support your weight. So we need this range of materials to actually give us all the things you see around you in your life. Now, if you started working in 3D printing now, you might be wondering what you'd be doing in 20 years' time. My answer probably is almost anything you can think of. Some of you might be working on parts for the next International Space Station. Some of you might be working on something to help a disabled child be able to get in and out of the shower better. When it comes to being an engineer, what you really need more than anything is just a curiosity about how things work and how you can make things better.